Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. So, welcome everyone to today's Members' Forum meeting. First, as always, some safety information. I'd like to draw your attention to the emergency evacuation procedure. Please exit the building from the nearest exit and congregate by the cathedral. Full details of the questions submitted to Member Forum and the written replies were published on the Council's website. Groups have submitted their questions in priority order and are presented rotating around the party groups. Each councillor has asked a maximum of 2 questions about one topic or 2 separate questions about 2 different topics. Councillors have a maximum of 2 supplementary questions. If a councillor asks 1 question, they have 1 supplementary, and if a councillor asks 2 questions, they can ask 1 supplementary per question asked. So let's begin with Green question number 1 from Councillor Levan. Is Councillor Levan here? Yeah, thank you. And this is a question for Councillor Plowden on the bus fare cap rise. Councillor Levan, do you have a supplementary?
Oh, yes, I do. Councillor Plowden, thank you for your response so far. I wondered if you could tell me what specifically you'll be asking the Metro Mayor Dan Norris to do about the bus fare cap rise.
Well, I'd like to see the Metro Mayor do what some of the other combined authority mayors have done, is announce that they use their own funding to maintain the £2 fare cap. I'm a little bit worried that he maybe, as subject to the parliamentary whip, his options to actually look out for our region and do the right thing for our region may be limited by the fact he'll be instructed to go with the £3 fare instead. I think the good news is, though, that it does look like that because the bus market is recovering quite well and we're back to pre-pandemic levels in Bristol itself, that we won't feel the full brunt of this, and we're in discussion with First, and it looks like, although it's a commercial offering, we're not going to see anything like a full £3 new fare in place.
Thank you, Councillor Plowden. Next, we've got Labour question 1, which is from Councillor Dunstan here. Thank you. And this is a question for the Council Leader, Councillor Dyer, and it's on Eagle House. Oh, sorry, you've got a supplementary. I beg your pardon.
Thank you for your response. The leader will be aware that the Green Party made a commitment at the last election to have the Eagle House building given back to the community for use as a youth club within 6 months of taking office. As it's now November, this commitment hasn't been met. Can you commit to working with the community to secure the future of these vital assets to the community?
Thank you, Councillor Dunstan. Just to confirm, the commitment was to return the asset to the community if legally possible. It has not proven at this stage to be legal to do so, but what I can say is that a decision on the future use of the property after the current tenant has vacated in 2026 will be made in due course. That will consider the needs and wishes of the local community so that they can be considered at that stage. And my hope would be that would include bringing that back into community use.
Thank you very much. Next is Lib Dem question 1 from Councillor Clark on housing allocation, and that's for Councillor Brown. Councillor Clark, do you have a supplementary, please?
Yes, thank you, my Lord Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Brown, for your response. As you probably know, that Councillor Varney and myself are very interested in maintaining as much green as possible. And I would just ask that if it's possible to consider using brownfield first, if the council could proceed on that basis and use greenfield sites as a last resort.
Thanks, Councillor Clark. The council doesn't have, the council doesn't have that level of control over the applications that are made to it and the order in which allocated sites within the local plan are utilised. What it has done, though, with the sites that you have I believe you have in mind, is it has put a distinctive policy in the local plan that talks around the challenges of bringing forward that site in terms of making sure it's sustainable, that it supports the traffic that will be generated from the site, that it has support for green space within that site, and then and enhances the some of the natural features that are in that site, as well as providing housing. And I think I can't talk about the site in question because it's specific. I can't talk about the application specifically, but those are the officers will be looking at the application in line with planning policy, both existing planning policy and the emerging local plan.
Thank you. I don't believe Councillor Weston is here, so...
No, he's running late. I'm sorry, Lord Mayor.
Okay, well, if we can, we'll go back to that question. Thank you very much, Councillor Glanders. So we'll move on to question 2. This is on the East Bristol Liberal neighbourhood for Councillor Plowden. Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Finch? Sorry, okay, thank you very much. Let's move on to Labour question 2 from Councillor Durston on council announcements, and I understand the Councillor Dyer is going to give a verbal response to the question.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, what I say is we have an ambition to ensure that ward councillors are given advance notice of announcements that are particularly relevant to their ward. In the case of planning decisions, obviously when development committee meetings meet, that's in public, so we cannot give forewarning of that if it's made in public. But where the decision is being made, either as a deferred decision or any other announcements, the objective is that we should be given ward councillors foreknowledge of that. So I can only apologise in this case for that happening and you not being informed. I know from personal experience how annoying it is when an announcement is made regarding your ward without you knowing about it until you read it in the press.
Councillor Durston, do you have a supplementary? Thank you very much. So let's move on to Lib Dem question 2 from Councillor Classic. This is for Councillor Parsons, and it's recommendations for Imperial supplementary. Councillor Classic.
Yes, thank you for the response. I note that there are 4 recommendations which Carridon obviously haven't decided to implement. I understand that there's a difficulty with Carridon being not Bristol City controlled, but what are we doing to actually push them on those points, specifically things like mitigating rising energy costs for tenants, which is such a huge deal at the moment?
Thank you, Councillor Classic. It's of course disappointing that Carridon have declined to carry out recommendations. What I intend to do is to write to them and ask for them to carry out all of those outstanding recommendations. And I've also, after discussions with Councillor Brown, I've requested a briefing on Imperial Apartments that will come to both Councillor Brown and I. I think we're looking at next month at the moment, and I'm going to ask that officers extend the invitation to that to all of the local ward councillors as well, so we can discuss next steps.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Hucker isn't here, so we move on to Green 3. Wells. This is for Councillor Plowden, and it's on e-scooter price rises. Councillor Wells, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thanks, Councillor Plowden, for the answer. That clarifies the arrangements around the contract. The supplementary is, do you think that WECA are being robust enough in enforcing the terms of their contract with Tier Dot?
Yes, and I think the answer is that we do need to make sure that we're being as robust as we can. Been disappointing to see some changes made to the pricing and some of the terms and conditions of schemes with very little notice. So we will certainly be discussing with WECA about how we make sure that some of the provisions are robustly managed. I think when it comes to pricing, I think we may have to regretfully accept that we're trying to make sure that this is commercially sustainable. So we will put some of the pricing into the hands of that commercial provider. But when it comes to things like, I think there's we've had a really good look at the contract actually over the last few days. And one of the things in there is to make sure that they give customers 5 days notice of changes to terms and conditions and prices, which hasn't been happening. So I'd certainly be discussing with WECA about making sure that we're enforcing the contract as robustly as we possibly can.
Thank you very much. Question 3, salaries. That's from Councillor Blake to Councillor Dyer. Councillor Blake, I believe you've got 2 supplementaries if you wish.
I'm just going to use one.
Thank you, Tony. Giving me the information. I think, would you agree with me that transparency around public spending is vital? I understand the sort of sensitivities there are around salaries. However, it's really important to maintain the sort of confidence in the public about how we spend public money. And I just wondered whether or not Tony would wholeheartedly agree with those sentiments.
It's vitally important that we are very careful with how we spend public money. I also think it's important we also respect individual privacy as well. What I can say in the interest of sound additional information is that amongst the core cities, Bristol has the lowest salary paid to its chief executive.
Thank you very much. So Lib Dem question 3 from Councillor Clark for Councillor Plowden on-street electrical vehicle charging. Councillor Clark, do you have a supplementary, please? I see you do.
Thank you, my lord. Thank you, Councillor Plowden, for your response. Not entirely satisfied with it, and maybe if we could have a conversation elsewhere. Your response sort of split into two things. I see that the council is not in favour of cross-pavement charging opportunities for residents. There are some systems out there which I know that a number of colleagues from the Greens have seen. There is the schemes that we do, the drop curb scheme at the moment, where residents have to use a registered provider by the council and they have to pay to have it done. So there's no cost to the council. And there are schemes out there in the marketplace where we could have safe cross-pavement charging conduits which residents could pay for. We could then administer them and make sure it's done under health and safety. And I think that would be a really good opportunity for many of our residents, particularly those who live in Victorian houses with Victorian terraces and no off-street parking. And I just wondered if you would be willing to have a conversation with me and seeing if we could progress this. And your second part of your response, more than happy with the fact that you're going to be rolling out more charging points. There's nothing that we've not, that's fantastic for the city. But in terms of on-street opportunities for local residents, it would be fantastic if we could have that opportunity to have that conversation and see if we could progress this.
So, the position I inherited, we won't do cross-pavement charging. And I know from my ward where you've got tightly packed Victorian streets, some with no gardens at all, that's been quite an inhibitor to people moving on to something that's clean, although definitely not a silver bullet for all of our transport problems. So if you look carefully at the latest policy position, and I can send a PDF out, it's saying that it is that officers will be looking at those new solutions over the next few months and reviewing our current position. So it's absolutely designed to look at how we might enable that to happen. I think there's two models we can go for. We can look at the market, which is actually now looking at saying that they'll cover all the health and safety and all the licensing. Of course, if we do that, we're at risk of those companies going out of business. So we may need some sort of bond or some sort of insurance to be taken out to make sure that we've got the liabilities covered, because it's not as simple as a drop curb. You're talking about electrical equipment you're talking about electrical, it's EV charging, it's electrical equipment.
Sorry, we can't have a discussion, just answer the question and then we'll move on.
Which need to be very carefully managed from a health and safety point on the highway. One option is to look at some sort of bond or licensing scheme for private providers, or the other is for the people to put in their solutions and the council then to take it on and maintain it, obviously with some sort of fee structure in place. We are looking at changing the policy specifically to make that more viable, but bearing in mind that once people have got electric cars, because it's a sixth of the price to drive them, they're likely to drive more, which is not really a policy position we want to necessarily endorse.
Thank you very much. So let's move on to question 3 from Councillor. Councillor Eddy, you've got 2 supplementaries for Councillor Plowden on the Uplands parking scheme.
Thank you, Lord. Firstly, may I apologise for any hesitation on my part. In truth, I'm still trying to get my head around receiving helpful replies since May. Before I only had insults, of course. But in terms of, can I welcome both positive replies from Councillor Plowden? They're very helpful.
Thank you very much. So let's do Green from Councillor Levan, and this is for Councillor Williams, and it's on Area Committee funding. Councillor Levan, supplementary. Thank you very much. So, Labour question for Councillor Self for Councillor Williams, and this is on the libraries review. Councillor Self, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please. I'm looking forward to some helpful responses, because the reply to this one was all about Lockleys, and as much as I'm interested in Lockleys, my question was actually about the review of library services, which was in the October edition of the Henleys and Westbury Voice, which I think is on dual columns. So my question is about the review of the libraries, which is reported to start this year. I just wanted to know a bit more about that.
Thanks for that. I think it was background to that. There was probably a general comment on the range of responsibilities that I have. Break this. I have as the committee chair, and indicating that a review of libraries was something that the committee was minded to do at some point. As Councillor Self will know, we're currently at the very early stages of the budget process, and once we've reached a later stage on that, then the committee will probably have to have a look at the library's service. And I say service rather than the network, because that's the way I'd like to look at it. What level of service do we provide to the Bristol public? What hours are the libraries open? Are they open, for instance, at evenings and lunchtimes, which of course is not the pattern at the moment. So while in theory we have a wonderful network of libraries at the moment, in practice for many of our fellow citizens, they're not open when they need them. So that's something I do anticipate the committee having a look at probably next year.
Thank you very much. So next Conservative question 4 on the PFI update. Councillor Morris, you've got 2 supplementaries for Councillor Dyer.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. It's the answer refers to there being a table, and there is no table in the answer.
Yes, I did highlight that with Democratic Services actually, so apologies, that's missing, but we obviously need to get that to you.
Please, then I base my answers on what's in the table. Thank you.
Okay, so we move on then. 5. This will, Councillor Fraser's not here, I believe, so we'll move on. Okay, so next we've got Labour question 5 from Councillor Alexander on Clayton Street car park. That's for Councillor Dyer. 1 supplementary, please, Councillor Alexander.
I'm reluctant to use my supplementary to ask for an answer to the original question, but in fact it says at the end, does Councillor Dyer agree that this is the correct approach? And there is no way is that answered in that response. And what I was asking was, does Councillor Dyer agree that selling off what's probably the last site for building social housing in Avonmouth at auction is the correct approach, given the shortage of social housing, the housing crisis we have, and the crisis of temporary accommodation? It doesn't seem to be the most imaginative, and certainly from the point of view of local people, the most satisfactory solution. But that, in fact, is what is happening.
Councillor Dyer, do you want to try again, and if you could answer a bit more? Thank you.
No problem at all. I'm always keen to look at maximising opportunities to deliver housing. However, this land has been identified, I believe, by the previous administration as being surplus to requirements. We have looked, the particular item that you mentioned here was either transfer the land to the housing department or Gorham. As partners of ours, both of them would have had the opportunity to look at the site when it was identified as being surplus for requirement. I could find out for you why they have so far not considered it as an option for them to put social housing on. But if we can find a way of increasing social housing, then yes, I fully support that.
Yes, please, Councillor Dyer. I would like you to specifically whether or not they have in fact been offered this land. And when you say that it was offered up for disposal by the previous administration, I was a cabinet member that did that. It was a car park, one of the car parks referred to earlier, and it was done in order to offer it up to internal departments in the hope that it could be given to housing, which is the natural solution, not sent for auction. And I think we have a subcommittee on property, which is about to happen, and I suggest in the absence of any clear policy for the disposal of land in the midst of this housing crisis, that we have a moratorium on further disposals until we have some political direction on this, which currently we don't seem to have.
Okay, you've had your supplementary ready, so we'll move on to the next question. So Councillor Hucker is not Townsend, I don't believe. So we'll move on to Labour question 6, which is on the Quality of Life Survey, and that's Councillor Bells for Councillor Williams. Is Councillor Bales here? Yes, hello Councillor Bells. You have one supplementary.
Yes. I first raised this when we passed the motion on domestic abuse, so I'm really surprised that this question is still in there, and if we've got to have a question on domestic abuse, why just this one and why just one? Can't we have a whole section on domestic abuse? It just seems odd that all the other sections, I've got lots of questions, which is really, really helpful, and it kind of helps us all with our roles. So why just one on domestic abuse?
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Thanks, Kerry. That's actually a really good point. And until you and I talked about this earlier, I didn't realise there was only one question about domestic abuse in the Quality of Life Survey. And I suggest what we do is myself and Kerry, Councillor Bales, have a conversation with the relevant officers in public health and see if we can perhaps look at how this is framed in future and whether there might be an opportunity for more questions without overloading the whole survey. But while we're here, I think it is worth mentioning what the answers are, because her ward is an outlier, which I suspect she probably knows that 22.5% of people in Hartcliffe and Withy would think that domestic violence should be treated as a private matter. And as the members are here as well, Stockwood 15.9% and Bishopsworth 16.2%. Those are the three outliers in our city where people think it should be a private matter as opposed to just over 6% in most other wards. So that might suggest a correlation that we need to think about. But I think the solution is for us to discuss this offline.
Thank you very much. So I believe Councillor Udin isn't here, Councillor isn't here, and Councillor isn't here. So we'll move on to Green question 8, which is on retrofitting buildings. That's from Councillor Y. Councillor Y, you've got two questions for Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, thanks for your response, Tony. I have to say my experience case, we're not quite embracing double glazing as much as the answer suggests. But my supplementary is, I'm really interested in the Bristol Heritage Strategy, and not now maybe, but I'd like to understand how that's been consulted on, how it's been constructive, and maybe you could put me in touch with officers doing it, because I'd like to input into it.
You have another supplementary if you wish, Councillor White. You're okay, thank you very much. So we'll move on to Labour question 8 on the A38. That's from Councillor Renard for Councillor Plowden. Councillor Renard, you've got one supplementary.
For the answer that commits that proceed, that's good news. I think it would be good to have some firmer timelines as soon as possible. My follow-up question, which we want to take away, is it does look like there was also a cycle lane, and could we ensure that that's reinstated as part of the works as well, so we have improved cycle infrastructure along that stretch?
So now, which is unless there's a good time, it can't be reinstated. The answer is yes, it will be reinstated.
Thank you. You heard it here first. So let's move on to Conservative on road resurfacing technologies from Councillor Galandris for Councillor Plowden. Two supplementaries, please.
Thanks very much, Lord Mayor. Thank you very much for your answers. Off the issue about the plastic moulding and all that. But I was very excited to see the JCB pothole repairer. And my question is this. It's very innovative. It's very exciting. The civil engineers I think it's got tremendous potential. I'm glad to see it's being looked at. So my supplementary is, are you willing to have a look at this? Because I think it looks quite exciting.
Absolutely. I think we need to embrace new technology carefully. So I think the whole answer to the question was very much I'm not sure it's the council that should be in the vanguard of this. National Highways has £27 billion over a 5-year period and struggles to do it, and I think they're the people that will be much more dominant in the market. But yes, always willing to look at new and better ideas, particularly as we mitigate and adapt to climate change. We can't keep doing things the way we've done in the past. We have to start looking at new ways of doing things, but we also have to be very mindful of the full life cycle costs of any asset and make sure that we're not just buying a quick fix, which turns out to be more expensive over the long term.
Okay, let's move on then to Green question 9 on this Park Forum. That's from Councillor Bra for Councillor Williams. Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Bra?
Yes, a very quick one. Thank you. I just wanted to sort of ask a behind the curtain question almost. Could you please just send me the contact details of anyone who helped you with that answer, and I'd like to talk to them directly, if you see what I mean. Would that be okay?
It would be, but I don't give away any secrets to say that the person who prepared the answer is the head of the Park Service.
Okay, that does the trick. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. So now we've got Labour question statement. Councillor Rippon, you've got one supplementary for Councillor Parsons, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yeah, just wondering, with around £500 million of new financial support announced, do you think it would have been better to do the autumn statement before withdrawing from Baltic Wharf and Hengrove 1B? Thanks.
Thanks for your question, Councillor Rippington. I think one of the sort of lessons of the budget is that big numbers can sometimes be a little deceptive. So, you know, £500 million sounds like an awful lot of money for the Affordable Homes Programme, but it's worth remembering that, you know, that programme set up under the previous Conservative administration was £11.5 billion in total. So over 20 times as much. You know, I don't think that any of us thinks, you know, we're currently in a sort of golden age of council house building, unfortunately. And unfortunately, the additional 500 million of funding for the Affordable Homes Programme won't actually benefit our development programme at all due to the timing of our completions. So the programme's due to end in March 2026. With extensions to 2027 for providers bidding through the continuous market engagement route by exceptions only. So although we have a number of schemes that are currently being delivered for which we've been allocated funding under the original regime, there's actually no schemes currently within our pipeline that could be delivered in time to access any additional sums. So what we're really waiting for is the launch of the next Affordable Homes Programme, which we expect to be announced in the spring. And we do have developments underway that we anticipate being able to move to Homes England funding through that programme. But for now, the position isn't greatly improved, and it would not have had any impact on the schemes you mentioned.
Thank you. I don't believe Councillor Tam is here either, so we move to question 10, which is from Councillor Bells for Councillor Parsons. Councillor Bells, do you have a supplementary? She's popped out the room. Okay, we'll move on to Labour question 11 on fly tipping fines. This is Councillor Dudd for Councillor Fodor. You've got one supplementary, Councillor Dudd.
Yeah, thanks for the information, Martin. So I was a little bit disappointed. I thought we'd potentially issue more fines since the new maximum was introduced. So it's only to see 16 when fly tipping is such a huge problem in my ward and many wards. So we'd really like to see that tightened up. But my question is, obviously the new legal maximum for littering is £500. We were planning to raise it to that level. So the powers came in just after we made a decision to raise it to the previous legal maximum. So we were going to raise it to 500. I just wondered, is that something you would consider doing, raising the fine for littering up to the FPN for littering up to the legal maximum of £500?
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Just in terms of the latest data, I have in fact asked the officers to tell all members through a newsletter
what's been carried out in terms of litter cleansing and initiatives like that, because I want everyone to be informed about the work that is being done to tackle fly tipping. In terms of raising to the full legal maximum, yes, I have asked about that. What we're having to do is weigh up who gets penalised by it and what the implications are, because we don't want to simply charge as many people as possible, as much as possible, if that doesn't help solve the problem. So we're just weighing up how the impact of that would affect residents, because we have civil enforcement officers. They're out there doing their work. We're trying to keep close track of how they're enforcing that, and if it makes sense to raise the level, then it can be.
Thank you very much. Councillor Weston's just entered the room. Councillor Weston, would you like to ask some supplementaries for your question on the traffic calming on Brentry Lane for Councillor Plowden?
My Lord Mayor, if you can disbelief and pretend that I'm in Councillor Michelat's shoes, although there are some physical divisions from us, shall we say. Thank you very much to Councillor Plowden for his responses. In particular, if I can just draw your attention to the third bullet point. Traffic calming is going to be needed on that stretch of Brentry Lane. They are looking at putting the speed cushions in. Actually, I think they're probably going to need chicaning, which is similar to what they put in on Station Road. I have levelled this with the officer, so my question is simple. Please could you raise the issue of chicaning that stretch of Brentry Lane with the officers? You can even make it pro-cyclist if you would like, and have them out to let a cycle path through.
The answer is, I think it'd be really good, did just last week, meet with officers together and go through the scheme and make sure that we're putting in a holistic and effective response, not just displacing it elsewhere, and follow up on the visit that you kindly hosted to me to your ward, but get officers literally to talk through their plans and try and come up with the most effective solution in collaboration, because you know your ward best.
Thank you, Councillor Plowden. You're us talking about a green loving again, but I do appreciate the sentiment, and yes, I will take you up on that meeting. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
It won't be a loving, it'll be a fairly technical and focused meeting on the highways in your ward.
I'm a compassionate Conservative. Can't it be both?
Okay, so that completes members' forum questions. I'll now take member statements in order of receipt. And I remind members that a maximum of 1 minute will be allowed for the presentation of each statement. There will be no debate on the statements, and they will be referred to the leader for consideration. So the first statement was from Councillor Graham Morris, and the subject is information retention and email retention policy. Graham Morris, you've got 1 minute. Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I don't need a minute. But basically, we heard tonight about the importance of transparency in public office. I think that the deletion of the Mayor's emails, whilst there were outstanding FOIs, was wrong, if we look at our own information retention policy. So I think we need to, evidence that we have tried to get them back so we can answer those FOIs and any follow-up questions off the back of them. And also, I think we need to look at what we can do to be more transparent as officials in public office and as a city to try and rebuild some trust between ourselves and the people that we represent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A smattering of applause, well done. So now we have statement number 2 from Councillor Mohammed Akari, and the subject is stand in solidarity with the victims of sexual violence in Sudan by the RSF militia. Councillor Akari, you've got 1 minute, please.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I to express my profound solidarity with the women of Sudan who face unimaginable level of sexual violence and abuse at the hand of the Rapid Support Force RSF militia. According to the recent report from the UN fact-finding mission, the paramilitary forces have committed appalling atrocity, including gangs, rape, torture, and sexual slavery. This act, primarily targeting women and girls, are carried out with shocking cruelty, often using knife, firearm, and weapon, and combined by racist and sexist slurs. The UN report reveals that this violence is neither random nor isolated. It is part of the calculated assault on Sudanese communities aim at terrorizing civilians and suppressing any opposition. The scale of this violence is staggering. In just the past weeks, villages have faced systematic attack, and entire communities have been brutalized. In one devastating case, a young woman have been gang raped by RSF soldiers in Jazeera State. The UN have warned that the RSF action across Sudan could signal a risk of genocide, especially in areas already scarred by conflict. Our community here in Bristol cannot stand by in silence. This council stands united in condemning this heinous crime, and we call on the international community and the UK government to act immediately to protect vulnerable Sudanese civilians and hold them accountable. We must ensure that Sudanese women are not longer silent by fears. To honor their suffering and amplify their voices, we are organizing the vigil soon for the victim of sexual violence in Sudan. I urge all of you to join us in standing together for justice, peace, and accountability for all Sudanese people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Makari, for highlighting that terrible situation in Sudan. That concludes the statements and the meeting. We will reconvene at 6 o'clock for full council. Thank you very much, everybody.